I imagine a few more will come in as lunch breaks up. My name is Robert Ammerman. I am at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and part of a home visiting program called Every Child Succeeds. I'm a psychologist by training, and I direct the sort of research program at Every Child Succeeds, and I'm happy to talk with you today about one of our efforts, that is to incorporate a co-parenting intervention called Family Foundations into home visiting. I want to acknowledge our funder, the National Institute on Child Health and Development, which has funded the clinical trial that we're still in the midst of. But also want to note that the developer of the Family Foundations program, Mark Feinberg at Penn State University, does have a program designed to sort of disseminate the various versions of Family Foundations, and including this one. I also want to point out that Family Foundations is acknowledged as a best practice on Innovation Station on the AMCHP website. So we're happy to have that recognition as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of the rationale behind focusing on co-parenting as sort of a mechanism, a lever in which we can make sort of big changes in the lives of mothers, fathers, and young children. Talk a bit about the evidence base for Family Foundations as a whole, and then talk about how we incorporated it into a home visiting program and the various changes and adaptations we need to make that we made, and give you some sort of preliminary picture of what that's looked like. First of all, when you look at the data, of course, families are complex. There are a lot of contextual features that drive child development and impact families in both positive and negative ways. But when we look at many of sort of the big issues that we face in maternal and child health, but public health generally, things like interpersonal violence, parent-child violence, and child maltreatment, alcohol abuse, mental health issues. Parental conflict and couples conflict is very much a feature of all of these issues. And it really suggests that might be a place where we should focus our attention. Couple conflict is also integral to a lot of different child outcomes, both in the short term, when children are younger in the earliest stages of development, but also well into adolescence and adulthood. And all of the things that we talk about, attachment, child behavioral and emotional adjustment, trouble in schools, substance abuse, through difficulties in their own interpersonal lives as they move into adolescence and adulthood. Again, couple conflict is very much a central feature of all of these things. So over the last 15 to 20 years, co-parenting has emerged sort of as a concept and has brought together a lot of people who want to focus on co-parenting as the way to address these issues. My colleague, Dr. Feinberg, defines it as the ways that parents work together and their roles as parents. But co-parenting stresses cooperation and support between mothers and fathers with a focus on the child and what's best for the child. There are 4 domains of co-parenting. That first on the left, supporting supporting each other as parents on behalf of the child, negotiating family management, who's going to do what the roles are going to be, what the division of labor is going to be, and agreeing on how they want to raise their child and what they want to focus on. So why target co-parenting? First of all, it's generalizable. All families engage in it in one form or another, either in a positive way or they struggle with it. But it's something where we can reach a lot of different families if we can sort of figure out how to facilitate, promote it, and teach parents how to do it most effectively. It's a precise target, and research has, I think, demonstrated pretty clearly that programs that really target an area, focus on it, and really strive to go deep on a particular topic can be quite effective, and more so than some of the interventions that we have that are broad and diffuse and address lots of areas simultaneously. As a result, we can get a stronger impact because parental conflict and co-parenting can be at the center of so many different behavioral, emotional, and social kinds of problems. By focusing on it, we can have a wide impact. And finally, co-parenting and a strong co-parenting relationship can be a buffer. Many of the families that we work with will continue to struggle with issues related to poverty, violence in their communities, economic and financial kinds of issues, to the extent, however, that they're working together in a cooperative fashion on behalf of the child. This can be a buffer against those kinds of forces, which we also know are important for children. So the Family Foundation's approach as an intervention has co-parenting as its focus, and the kinds of outcomes it seeks to change. It seeks to change parenting behavior. It seeks to change parental adjustment, too, how mothers and fathers are doing in their own lives, all with a focus, of course, on child well-being and optimizing child development. Family Foundations emphasizes the transition into parenthood. So it's something that we administer starting in pregnancy or shortly after the birth of the child in the case of FF at Home, which is our program in home visiting. This is an important stage because we know, lots of research has shown that a lot of things happen in that transition to parenting. First of all, we see elevated rates of depression, not just in mothers, but in fathers as well, greater stress and more conflict as those early years of child rearing become prominent. There's a decrease in intimacy and romance, struggles expressing affection and companionship. All of these sort of take a hit in those first few years in this transition to parenthood. We know that once these problems begin, in all likelihood, they will worsen over time. So getting there early and doing something in a preventive way, which is a guiding principle of Family Foundations, we think is important. And of course, from the child's perspective, these first few years of life, as you know well, are critical for development, emotional and behavioral self-regulation, development of cognitive capacities, language acquisition. These first few years, so much is happening, and they need a lot of support and scaffolding in order to develop all those things optimally. Family Foundations, as it was originally conceived and has been studied in this way, we made some changes, as I'll tell you about in the home visiting realm, is a universal program, so it's meant for all parents. It was delivered in a group format to expectant parents through childhood education programs. So it was part of birth hospitals and prenatal clinics and sort of attached to other kinds of programs related to pregnancy and childbirth. It consisted of 5 prenatal sessions, about 2 hours in length, and 4 postnatal sessions, each run by a pair of group leaders and facilitators. The targets for change are these 3 areas: feelings, thoughts, and communication. feelings, helping parents identify feelings, label feelings, express them, normalizing the kind of stressors that they experience and feel in this transition into parenthood and the arrival of a new child, self-awareness. And I'll show some videos in which parents talk about that feature. Thoughts being how they think about themselves, their future, their partner, their child, being able to talk to others and being able also to talk to themselves so that they can regulate their own emotions and behavior. And then this emphasis on communication, developing communication skills, being able to talk about conflict and disagreement and feelings of anger or frustration, and how to navigate that is a real focus of the program. In fact, the Family Foundations program has sort of several phrases that occur throughout and are repeated often. I've always thought that those of us in the Family Foundations world should get this tattooed somewhere on our arm, so we always remember it. But this FTC, First the Child, is something that is repeated often, and parents, very much internalize this phrase and use this phrase. But it also speaks to the three areas: feelings, thoughts, and communications. And one of the nice features of Family Foundations is, even though in its original version there were 9 sessions, that there's a repetition of certain key concepts that are really sort of grounded in the program and learned by participants. There have been 2 randomized clinical trials of Family Foundations, the first involving 169 couples and the second 400. They have followed children all the way up to age 7, the first one, the second one somewhere in the middle. But the findings are impressive, and I want to share some of them with you. This shows the 2 trials, FF1 and FF2, at the different time points, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years. Different things were measured at different times, so they don't all show up in the same way. But the asterisk indicates where positive results were found for the intervention versus the control group, which did not get the Family Foundations program. And you can see there are a number of positive outcomes for areas that are really central to the program: co-parenting, working together, sharing the same vision and focus for the child; parental depression, which is sort of an interesting kind of outcome. It's not the primary focus of the training program, but by being able to navigate the issues around raising children, it improves mood. Quality of parenting in terms of providing nurturing and stimulating parenting to children. And then we see some key outcomes for the children in child attention, child sleep, which of course has gotten a lot of attention recently as a major stressor that we should be focusing on, and the child's ability to soothe themselves and regulate their own emotional upset. There have also been very nice positive effects in areas of violence, interpersonal violence and parent-child violence. And this divides it up into sort of psychological abuse and physical abuse. Those are pretty big effect sizes for a prevention program. Usually prevention programs are a little smaller, so this is an impressive kind of thing. And again, if you think the Family Foundations isn't explicitly about violence or violence reduction, it's something that comes out of learning the skills of working together and co-parenting. There's also evidence to indicate that many of the sort of biggest effects are experienced by those families that have the highest risk. This particular graph from one of the studies, make sure I hit the right button, shows down here negative communication patterns sort of severity among couples when they entered the program, with a higher number indicating that they're starting off already really struggling to communicate, resolve conflict, and treat each other in a civil and respectful way. And then what they look like in terms of parenting behavior at the end of the intervention. And this is the intervention group, this is the control group. So you can see the control group, gets the worse they start, the worse they sort of end up. Whereas we've got really a flat and slightly decreasing line for the intervention group. This kind of sort of difference between the two is found in some of the other outcomes that were measured in the clinical trials. So that's good because we're all particularly concerned with those families that struggle the most. And this would suggest that this can be a real buffer. There was also a recent outcome study of the Family Foundation program looking at positive changes in birth outcomes. Again, sort of a nice sort of secondary outcome in the sense that this isn't the primary focus of the intervention, but it does show how when you focus on co-parenting, a lot of things can sort of go with it and be carried with it. And the trials demonstrating higher birth weight, decreased rates of prematurity, shorter infant and mother stays in the hospital. So here's another example. This is actually not from Family Foundations, but from a study by Sobolewski and King, looking at sort of the central role of co-parenting on fathers. And I show you this because in the home visiting world, and I assume some or all of you are sort of part of that, there's a lot of discussion about how do we engage fathers, how do we bring fathers into the process, how can we make our home visiting programs family programs and not just mother-focused programs. And what this diagram suggests is that co-parenting may be a really good way of doing that. Much of the work in home visiting is focused on how do we appeal to fathers, how can we structure our home visits so that they can participate and hear the same kinds of things that the mom is hearing as part of the home visits, how do we form father groups to give them sort of a home within the home visiting context that they can come to. Co-parenting, though, is different because co-parenting is about mothers and fathers. It's not just a father engagement program. It's very much a mother and father engagement program. But as we can see, what this shows is that cooperative parenting in this study of sort of high-risk mothers and fathers is, well, let me go over here actually to the middle, and that is father-child contact, which is one of the things we want to increase, not just within home visiting, but generally in terms of our interest in fathers. We want fathers to spend more time with children, but we also want that time to be sort of high quality and stimulating and nurturing and relationship building. We can see father-child contact is very much related to responsive fathering. So that's good. We want that to happen. And the relationship quality between mothers and children, or I'm sorry, between fathers and their children, but it's cooperative parenting that really is a big driver of this contact. So when we work with mothers and fathers to help them raise their child together, one of the things we see is this greater contact and the higher quality of contact and father parenting. So this makes it, I think, highly relevant for home visiting. Even though I suspect most, if not all of you, are pretty familiar with home visiting, but home visiting is an intervention primarily focused on mothers and children. I think it operates in pretty much every state at this point. No one has ever been able to figure out exactly how many families are in home visiting. I've estimated about 650,000 plus a bit annually. There are a number of different models of home visiting. Some of the most common ones that I'm sure you've heard of: Nurse-Family Partnership, Healthy Families America, Parents as Teachers. It was established as part of the Affordable Care Act to expand home visiting through the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program. affectionately known as McV. It was just renewed. You probably know. Yeah, I say hooray. I was trying to figure out how to put a little sound thing in there for clapping, because those of us in the field, and maybe you're all in it, we're sort of hoping and waiting and worried. So we got a five-year renewal. So that's good for the programs, and it's good for the families that we serve. But the message is, here's a group who have joined a program all over the country to try to be the best parents that they can be, and to try to give their children the best possible start. So that led us to think about, can we use this kind of program to also incorporate a co-parenting intervention? For those of you familiar with some of the things we've done in Every Child Succeeds, that's sort of been part of our thinking since we began. How can we use this program to maybe squeeze a few other things in there that are beneficial to mothers and children and fathers? Some common elements to home visiting that, again, sort of make it a sort of a nice platform in which to think about this. Most home visiting programs enroll children in families sort of early in the child's life, many during pregnancy. A number of them focus on first-time parents. So this fits very nicely in terms of when you intervene around co-parenting and the importance of getting there early. Getting them early in their parenting roles, again, first-time parents in particular, they're at that stage, and it lends itself well to co-parenting. The focus on strengthening protective factors, mitigating risk factors, promoting positive trajectories. That's sort of a real complementary sort of mirror image of what the co-parenting interventions are designed to do and what Family Foundations is designed to do. So there's a real compatibility here. There's a real sort of shared set of sort of values and desired outcomes. Home visiting uses multiple strategies and has lots of different tools in the tool chest, so the idea of incorporating this is very consistent with how the approach is set up. And the frequent contact and extended duration is very nice. And it even suggests that if we were to deliver a co-parenting intervention, it has a beginning and an end. So you could see originally it was 9 sessions, and then it ends. But if moms and dads and families continue to participate in home visiting, there are opportunities to really sort of build on those experiences and really maximize outcomes. We did this work in Every Child Succeeds, the home visiting work at least. And for those of you who don't know, Every Child Succeeds is based in Cincinnati, managed by Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Although it very much is sort of a community collaborative involving 9 agencies in 7 counties in southwestern Ohio and northern Kentucky. We actually use 4 home visiting models. Healthy Families America, the HANDS program, which is Kentucky's statewide program, Early Head Start, and Safe Care. And most of our moms do enroll during pregnancy, so this is sort of good timing. We've been around since 1999, and we've seen over 26,000 families at this point and provided over 675,000 home visits. So we've been around a while, and we've been able to see a lot of families. Every Child Succeeds was set up to also sort of be a place for sort of innovation and discovery and sort of generation of new approaches that could be used by other kinds of programs. So tomorrow we're going to be doing something on our depression program, Moving Beyond Depression. This is Family Foundations, so that sort of idea of using this sort of real-world, large-scale, regional home visiting program to also drive discovery has been part of what we've strived to do. We certainly saw some opportunities here, as I said. we realized we would have to do family foundations in the home setting. So in its first iteration, it was a group setting based in birth hospitals or prenatal clinics. We realized for family foundations at home, we would need to go to the families in the same way why we do home visiting generally. That is, they often struggle to consistently come to center-based care, so bringing it to them is a great opportunity. There are advantages to doing all of these interventions in the home. You get to be in the place where the child is being raised. You get to talk to moms and dads about negotiating conflict in the same rooms and in the same chairs in which that conflict happens. And that sort of proximal relationship with the family environment, I think, is potentially very powerful. And it's also more comfortable for families. It's their space, it's their home, and we saw that as something we wanted to leverage and take advantage of. But there are challenges going into home settings. This is not unique to family foundations or really any sort of home-based program, but there are sometimes other people in the home. The home is not always a conducive place to find a space where mom and dad and two facilitators can work together. But we were able to do it, and that became part of the work and part of the adaptation and part of a challenge. We conducted focus groups before we began this work to sort of guide our adaptation. And the focus groups were with mothers and fathers who were in our home visiting program during the first year. But we also asked home visitors a lot of questions about moms and dads and co-parenting to help guide us. And anyone who works in home visiting, again, maybe all of you, you know that there's sort of an underground of knowledge. Home visitors know a tremendous amount, and it doesn't always find its way to those of us who might be designing curricula. And this provided an opportunity for us to really learn something, and I think we learned a lot from the home visitors, in addition to the moms and the dads. So these are the kinds of things that sort of emerged. And as you can see, we sort of divided them into whether these were things that moms brought up, or fathers brought up, or home visitors brought up. So there were some topics that everyone sort of recognized, yeah, this is an issue and something that we think about it or struggle with, but sometimes it depended on sort of who you asked. I'll just sort of highlight a couple of them. The dads talked a lot about desiring to be present with their children and to be available. They talked about their own experiences with their fathers, many of whom were not available or were not there for various reasons, and something that they wanted to be different. There was a sense among the home visitors, and several of the dads sort of alluded to this, of particularly looking forward to a point at which the child would be sort of talking and walking and running around, and they could do things with them physically, and just sort of a looking forward to that stage, and not necessarily understanding the potential joy of those first few years. Also a sense that, and this came out too, that the fathers felt that the task of parenting wouldn't be quite as difficult as the mothers seemed to believe. All of them talked about intermittent fathering, although we did have several dads in the group who had children in other relationships, and they saw them too. So from the dad's perspective, they were actually kind of doing a lot of fathering. It was just different kids at different places and in different families, so their perspective was understandably different. One thing that came out was the skepticism that mothers had about the parenting ability of the dads, a sense that they weren't up to the task and couldn't quite do it and would need a lot of extra support, something that the dads didn't always agree with, but that at least is something they're sort of bringing to the table. They all talked about the importance of communication, so there was a real sort of awareness of it, but they described handling situations in ways that were not healthy and not likely to lead to sort of resolution of a conflict or a disagreement. They talked about sort of leaving the room, one partner deciding to sort of not talk about a topic as a way to diffuse the situation, but then it just festered, of course, and was sort of in the air and unresolved. And that led to problems. And that sort of passive aggressiveness that both partners talked about doing with each other was something we heard a lot about. The home visitors really thought that many of the moms and dads that they worked with lacked even really pretty basic conflict negotiation skills. And one in particular said that she thought that they all needed therapy. Now, I took that phrase with sort of a grain of salt. I don't know if they all need, I don't think they all need therapy, but it speaks to this sense, at least among the home visitors, that there was something really fundamental missing in their ability to talk to each other about resolving skills. So it led us to believe that this focus on co-parenting is probably a good idea. Some quotes, and there of course were a number of them. Here, a mom talking about sort of resentment she had in terms of her own father that she acknowledges sort of bringing into the relationship with her current partner, but also a sense of recognition that isn't totally fair to her current partner, and that she needs to be more understanding. A second quote, and there were a number of these. Dad's sort of picking up on the lack of confidence that his partner, the mom, had in him, and that makes him feel bad, and he takes that as rejection and decides, well, fine, I won't do it then. And that kind of sort of pattern of communication where there are really issues beneath the surface that are driving their responses to each other complicates their ability to successfully navigate it. Home visitors, again, bringing up communication is really important, and how to talk to each other in a civil and respectful way so that you can actually resolve things. Extended family was brought up. Other family members being gatekeepers, for access of fathers to their children when moms and children were living with her family. They talked about the importance of families in supporting them, but then others talked about examples of being very much rejected and abandoned by families. Interestingly, despite the fact Every Child Succeeds is a program that welcomes fathers, as do I think most, but dads still sort of pick up that this is more about mothers. We have a logo with a mother on it. I don't know if we'll ever get rid of it because we really like the logo. However, they see it, and they make their interpretation as what that means. One dad, as part of these focus groups, talked about a home visitor who really helped him get a job, actually. He was very grateful for that, but he also said, she never pronounced my name correctly. So he picked up on that too, and that was something that stuck with him. So this all led us to these adaptations to family foundations at home. Providing the service in the home, we actually introduced both prenatal and postnatal enrollment. The prenatal enrollment has some advantages, but we learned that there were dads who weren't very involved with their partners during the prenatal stage, but got more interested once the baby was born. So we saw that as a second window in which we could engage dads in co-parenting. We stressed very much experiential activities as part of the intervention. The intervention has them, but we added to them, repeated them, and tried to emphasize them more than didactic features of the intervention. We used a lot of this, the FTC, as I told you, the messages and phrases, first the child, to make it more relevant. We simplified the worksheets. We realized that for a lot of our families, some of this information was fairly basic and that they had not really been exposed to it or raised in this way. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't overly complicate all of it. We did a lot of repetition. We added 2 father sessions. We had a male and female facilitator. We wanted the father to have something, so the male facilitator had 2 separate sessions with dad alone. And we very much emphasized building a team on behalf of the child. We also got to collaborate with the home visitors. So here's that advantage of sort of adding this to ongoing home visiting. You have somebody else there who's doing very important work, and there's opportunity for collaboration and cooperation and coordination, CCC. Actually, I just made that up, but that's those are 3 important elements. They provided a lot of assistance, sometimes when families sort of fell off the radar, as they do in home visiting. If that happened to the home visitor, she could call the facilitators and find out where families were. If it happened on the Family Foundation side, they could contact home visitors and get that kind of service. And of course, or get that kind of information. Linking both moms and dads to other needed services was something home visitors, of course, were very good at. The one-on-one father sessions, we originally conceptualized these as very much focused on sort of problem solving and linking dads to education, employment, other kinds of services. But they actually came to be a place where fathers sort of had an outlet. They could talk about their own experiences with their fathers, their anxiety and excitement about being fathers, and their concerns and doubts, which they felt uncomfortable bringing up with their partners because it made them pretty vulnerable. They could do it in these sessions, and that turned out to be kind of an important element of what we did. Family Foundations is highly structured. This is what it looks like in all of its different forms. But we added a couple of sessions. You can see there's that emphasis, first the child, in session 2, feelings, conflict, communication. So it's pretty highly manualized. So there's some back and forth, and families can talk about things that are important to them, but the facilitators very much have sort of an agenda and a set of sort of learnings that they want to impart. And for our prenatal families, we did the 6 prior to the birth of the child, and then the first father session, and then after the birth of the child, we moved into sort of issues related to the fact that the child was there, and we offered the second father one-on-one postnatally. These are the things that we emphasized. First the child, team, importance of breathing, taking a break, calming down so you can talk about things in a calm way. Awareness and recognition of emotions. We have what we call speak out, listen up, in which each person is allowed to talk about things that are important to them, and the other partner is to listen and not interrupt. We emphasize parenting strengths. What are you going to do well as a parent, do you think? What do you think your partner will do well? What are your hopes, aspirations, values? What I'd like to show is a video of one of the exercises. Okay, I don't know what that means, so we won't press it. And we'll go to this one. This is something called the balloon exercise.
So this would be kind
The
of easy for you.
opposite. Yeah, keeping it up in the air instead of dribbling it down, huh?
Hand-eye coordination.
Yeah. This is your work and responsibility, okay? You're the yellow. There you go.
And you're the red. Just keep it up.
Work and responsibility.
Now, if you want to face each other, you can. And if one of you guys needs help,
You start throwing the other ones at us, huh?
okay.
We don't even
that
dare
again?
throw them at you.
That's
Work
work
and
and
responsibility.
Okay.
So you guys got that easy.
Yeah.
So how about some social life? You guys want some social life in there too?
Okay. They got it going.
Wow.
That's how always the social life goes out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, get them back going.
Space, no.
Now you guys can help each other out if you need to too.
Anybody volleyball player?
That would be easier to do these, wouldn't it?
I just know in Buffalo you can use your foot. Like you can.
Okay.
Oh.
But anyway.
So you can see they have to work together to make this work.
Okay. Don't forget to breathe.
We're gonna teach you that one here in a minute. Breathe.
Okay, now they're told to
Try
breathe.
again.
They've been taught that earlier.
You can do this.
Work and responsibility and social life. Y'all got them all going. That's something.
Just keep going what you can.
Keep as many of them up as you
Yeah.
can.
And how about here comes baby?
There's
Don't drop the
Gabriella
baby.
right there.
Don't drop the baby.
Don't
Here, we'll
drop
help you.
Gabriella.
There you
That's
go.
Gabriella there.
Yeah.
My parents.
Don't drop the baby.
Okay.
All right, so the baby
That's
stays in the air, the other
Social
things
life's
drop,
on, work
so they're getting the
responsibility,
idea
you
of
just
first
got
the child.
Okay, that's it. You guys can stop. And you can keep the balloon in case you want to practice on your own.
Yeah.
All right, so then there's a discussion. So these kinds of activities are throughout the program. You know, they're games in a sense, but they emphasize certain points, and they work together, and they break the session up into something that's more enjoyable, and it sticks with you. So we've done a number of sort of videos at the end of the services to get their sense. Well, what was this like? They often talk about these exercises as sort of what they learned and what's sort of sticking in their head. We did experience challenges by offering this through home visiting. Certainly, one of the things we learned is that for a number of the moms and dads, the child was unplanned, and they had not gone through sort of a courtship process prior to having the child. So they were really just learning to sort of know each other in the context of becoming new parents, which is, of course, not an ideal way to do it. And that relationship instability we saw in programs where moms and dads would split up after session 3 and be back by session 6. We had fathers who were incarcerated. And interestingly enough, even though you would think that would completely take the father out of the picture for that period of time, we had one family where when mom talked to dad while he was in jail, she shared with him all that was covered in that week's session, because we kept moving ahead. And then he was quite appreciative, and when he came back, he actually knew something and was sort of partly caught up at least. There were clinical issues. As we know, home visiting is a prevention program, but it attracts a group of people who are struggling with mental health problems, issues related to trauma. Not surprisingly, all of these things manifested themselves within the Family Foundation's visits as well. And the facilitators, we spent a fair amount of time trying to make sure that this did not become a therapy session, which was not its purpose, and the facilitators were not mental health professionals. But that kind of guidance and supervision was helpful in setting up those kinds of boundaries. Moms and dads often had children from other relationships. Of course, no surprise, I think, to the audience. These are just issues that we face, and that had to be stressed. Although we had both moms and dads talk about how, well, what I'm learning here, I'm using with my other kids too. So there's sort of a nice spread. We had several issues of domestic violence that had to be addressed. We had other family members who wanted to sit in, wanted to give advice. We often had to sort of talk to them about the importance of, the mom and dad need to learn to do this together, and need some experience to become parents on their own. We had a lady who actually was really just allowing the mom and dad to live with them, sort of a family friend. And she was a professional mental health counselor, so she wanted to come in and participate. Just a complicating feature, something to work out, didn't derail anything, but we had to talk about it and think about it. And then the service disruption I mentioned. So let me show another video. This is kind of a sort of a promotional video that we put together that tries to bring together a couple of things. But it starts off with one of our male facilitators, group leaders, talking. And what I really like about the fact that he sort of opens it up is, for those of us who work in this fatherhood space, one of the issues we have is that there aren't a lot of people trained out there to work in these kinds of fatherhood programs. So basically what we did for him is we trained him to do this kind of work. And he's not with us anymore, but I encouraged him to say, you can make a career out of this. You can be doing this kind of work. There's a real need for it. So I think that's a positive thing that we did.
Family Foundations is a program designed for mothers and fathers who just want to co-parent together. I think it's a great program because you don't have to be married. You just have to agree to want to put your child first, and that's one of the themes of our program is simply to put your.
You'd think after all this time I would learn to just leave this stuff alone.
Family Foundations is a program designed for mothers and fathers who just want to co-parent together. I think it's a great program because you don't have to be married. You just have to agree to want to put your child first, and that's one of the themes of our program is simply to put your child first. So no matter what happens between your relationship, no matter if you guys get married, no matter sometimes people break up, we just want you guys to agree to put your child first.
How has being in this program affected your relationship?
It has made our relationship stronger. We're able to communicate with each other now instead of fighting and yelling. And we're able to work to solve problems together and meet in the middle with them.
I couldn't agree with her even more. Being a part of this program does make you a much better person to your spouse. And we really work out a lot of problems together. Just really listen to each other, understand each other's feelings, understand when is the right time to talk about things, and never say never, because that's a deep word, and just being there for them physically, emotionally, really makes a big difference.
I have learned that I'm not open with my feelings about how I feel about stuff, and I don't communicate a lot. But since Steven and Alex has came out, I started being more open and talk about my feelings and stuff and communicate with Manny.
As for me, a couple examples of things that I have learned is that sometimes I seem to be the parent to show more tough love, and so I learned to kind of balance a few of those things out more. Also, I've learned that really being there for your children, as simple as a hug and a kiss goodnight, it really means the world to them, and they really could be impacted dramatically from that, and really feel the affection that we have to offer for them. It's a great foundation to participate in. There's some fantastic folks that come to your house every week and and they're not there to bring down your day or anything of that nature. They're just here to show you a better path and how to become a parent and be a parent to your children.
They're not here to judge you. They're here to help you build a stronger parenting relationship with your significant other and to help build your parenting skills and make it stronger.
One of the things I like about sort of the videos that we have collected is the moms and dads really incorporate some of these key messages. And I think that's that repetition. So you can even see them talking about just sort of these key things: communicating, being self-aware, understanding that words matter. I've got my role, she has her role. All of sort of the key elements of the program sort of really stick. And the families talk about it in slightly different ways, but I think the repetition of some of these concepts really makes them stick. There are a number of sort of versions of family foundations. Of course, there's the original version, and we've got our family foundations at home. There's a slightly different version that's been developed for teen parents and military families. So I think this is... a lot of this is being led by Dr. Feinberg. But I think we're at sort of an interesting point in just prevention programs generally. 20 years ago, we weren't sure about what we should be doing. Now I think we've got a number of programs, and we have sort of a sense of how much they work. And the question becomes, how can we adapt them for the populations and settings in which we're working to really optimize their impact? So I think what we're seeing here with what we're doing with Family Foundations is going to be something we're going to see with a lot of these programs over the next 10 years, and I think it's actually a healthy development. If you're interested in more, as I said, Innovation Station on the AMCHP website has actually a very thorough description of Family Foundations. Since it was recognized as a best practice, feel free to contact me or Dr. Feinberg. The slides have been uploaded to your app, and you can get them. And happy to take sort of questions or comments or your own experiences. You'll need to use the microphone, so I'm going to bring the microphone to whoever wants to say something. Easier said than done.
Thank you for that. I have two questions and one comment. I don't know. I'll start with the questions. The first thing was, has this been replicated in less traditional families, like same-sex parents, or a single woman who may be, to all intents and purposes, co-parenting with one of her parents or with someone else? If so, what did that look any different? That's my first question.
Yeah.
Do you want me to lay out all the questions?
No, because I
Okay.
won't remember them.
Okay,
I
fair
need
enough.
to go one at a time. And that's a great question. My understanding is Dr. Feinberg is developing a version for same-sex couples, same-sex parents, again, as part of this theme of sort of adaptation, accommodation, working with, strengths and practices to make it most impactful. The second one was, well, let me take a step back. This program, you didn't have to be married. You just had to be a mother and a father and committed to raising your child. Having said that, we got a lot of married couples. Not all of them by any means, but I think connecting with mothers and fathers who are sort of further apart, if you will, at the start is a challenge. It should be a challenge. It's one of the things we need to fix. I'm not aware that it's been done with moms who might be living at home with their parents. Is that what you?
Well, or living with another adult, whoever that adult may
Yeah.
be. It could be a, I don't know, there are
Yeah.
lots of family constellations.
The only, absolutely. And the content in many ways can probably adapt to lots of constellations given what it is. Having said that, one principle and assumption is that commitment to raising the child over the long term. So that is sort of an opening premise. So if someone were in a temporary arrangement and they knew it was temporary, they did not qualify for us. And I think it would be harder because that's just that's emphasized throughout and appealed to. Whatever difficulties you're having with your partner, you all share one thing, and that is you want the best for that child over the long run. Yeah.
So I have one other question. And that other question was, you sort of mentioned DV.
Yes.
And one of my questions is, the degree to which you screen before they enter the program, because I know that a lot
Yeah.
of the more traditional couples therapy hasn't really worked out when there's underlying DV, because whichever partner may have more power and
Yes.
control in the relationship can also control the therapy.
Yes.
If you will. So I just was wondering what your experience with that was.
Well, it was complicated, just like you described it. We took that on kind of a case-by-case basis and talked about it and tried to figure it out. I don't have an easy answer to it. I would say you talked about power differential. We had a number of different cultures represented. We had several families in which sort of the power structure, as culturally determined, very much favored fathers over mothers. We had to sort of figure that out. We didn't want to, change that or interfere with that. On the other hand, there are aspects of the program about sort of sharing and equal space that sometimes brush up against strongly held cultural beliefs and practices. I have to say we did that on a case-by-case basis too. But it seems to me that can probably be sort of developed and fleshed out and figured out more systematically over time. And I think we should all be doing this. This isn't unique to Family Foundations. This reflects all of our work. Yeah. Yes.
That's okay. Okay. So quick comment on the map. I think if you looked at it now, it would look quite different because of McVie and the ACA. They're now.
I think you're right. It was more of a prop.
Right. Sure, that's okay.
Yeah. It is good. Yes, I agree.
So you kind of rolled this out in combination with home visiting, like established home visiting models.
Yes.
Is that the way that the plan is to roll out? And I guess the other question would be representing a model and knowing that some of the information that you're presenting in yours is covered in other models, but they may be using different language, or there actually may be a little bit of kind of distance between where your model goes and where another model goes. So I'm just concerned about confusion and duplication and those things.
Yeah, we sort of went through that process as we thought about this, and we don't operate every model, obviously, but we operate, and we've operated a nurse-family partnership model too. So we're pretty familiar with several other models. There's sort of overlap, perhaps, in a little bit of the concepts, but you can't beat 22 hours focused on this topic. I mean, you get to dig real deep, and the home visitor, I think, would struggle to do that in the context of all the other things. So I think this is separate enough and distinct enough to be sort of packaged. I think there's also value in having the male and female facilitator. That sense of, when dads do participate in home visits, since so many of them have the perception this is primarily for mom, their sense is they're not the primary parent, just in the context of it all. When you have the male and female facilitator, everybody's equal in a way, and there's no sense of sort of favoritism. So I think there's value in separating the two. Yeah, okay.
I was going to ask, so is there always a male facilitating as a part of this at each visit?
That's yes. That's the way we set it up. Now, here's reality. I mean, reality is sometimes somebody's sick.
Yeah.
Sometimes someone resigns and you got to replace them. We always moved ahead. That went both ways, actually. We had a female facilitator move on to another job. We had to hire another one. This isn't work that just anyone can do. You have to have some skills and relationship building, just like home visitors.
How'd you recruit them?
It was not easy in that there's no sort of established profession or line of work. We relied very heavily on our professional networks in the Cincinnati region to find people who might be interested. There are several other fatherhood programs, and there were a couple of people there who expressed interest. But the idea, the generalizability, if you've got good relationship skills, you could do this. This is not, you don't have to have a master's degree, you don't have to have a specialized degree. But finding people who look at this kind of job description and say, boy, that's something I want to do. We got to build it up, right? We've got to build all of these things up so that becomes sort of a thing folks want to do. Is that it? Okay, well, thank you for coming.